Welcome to a special edition of Legal AF. Often when I talk about the media and Donald Trump in some sort of lawsuit, it's the media on the other side of the V as the defendants in a defamation case or a target of a criminal investigation or a subpoena or some other way that Donald Trump's trying to chill First Amendment expression or freedom of the press. But I am happy to report on a breakthrough new lawsuit, really the first time in this administration that a member of the media has sued Donald Trump instead of being the other way around, and about the Epstein files and the Epstein Transparency Act. And when I got all the pings that I get from all my notifications, I'm like, oh, who did it? Oh, wait a minute. Is this my friend and fellow legal commentator, Katie Phang, who's the plaintiff in a new case? Oh, yes, it is. And oh, yes, she did. Let's bring her in. We'll talk about the new case and why it matters. Hi, Katie.
Hey, Mike.
I was like, is this Katie Phang's suit? All right, look.
It is. I'm a plaintiff.
What I've been waiting for, and I understand why they haven't, and I'm so glad you stepped into the breach. Was for an Epstein victim or survivor to be the plaintiff, which was sort of a natural. Now, I represent one of the survivors, Lisa Phillips, and I get why they don't necessarily want to be leading on this particular type of lawsuit. I get it. And I also get why victimizing the victims the way Melania Trump has done with her angry calls. Where's that anger coming from? Angry calls that the victims be able to testify live and in person about their sexual abuse on the congressional record may not be what we're thinking about when we think about justice and dignity for people who were sexually trafficked, right? Like, why are we putting it on them to do their own investigation, as opposed to the Department of Justice doing their job, right? Why do the men get to testify behind closed doors and the victims have to go on the congressional record? So having said that, I'm like, will anyone respond to this bat signal and file a lawsuit about the violations of the Epstein Transparency Act by this administration? And you have with your news about the decision to do it, and we can get into the lawsuit itself.
It was a no-brainer to file suit. It was some measure of creativity, though, right? Because to your point, I think the natural default would be a victim or survivor coming forward. But also to your point, they have been victimized and abused over and over again. And I think it's a horrible shifting of the burden to put it on them to have to find justice when there should be departments of justice in place and prosecuting offices in place and law enforcement agencies in place to do investigations and prosecutions to bring justice. And so I had noticed that in my work as an independent journalist, Mike, that I was covering the Epstein files, but then I hit the roadblocks that prevented me from going any farther. And that was because the redactions were done in a way that sometimes entire pages were redacted illegally pursuant to the Epstein Files Transparency Act. I couldn't tell you what's in them, right? And then I also noticed that there were things like, information about Donald Trump that was put up on the website and then taken down and never comes back up. I mean, there's stuff that is missing, and I couldn't do my job. And as we sit here today, I can't do my job, which is reporting on the facts and the evidence in and around the Epstein files if I don't have access to them. So I sued, and I'm suing Attorney General Todd Blanche, acting Attorney General Todd Blanche, because Pam and Joe got fired. And I want the full transparency on these Epstein files.
Yeah, in your footnote 1, you comment that on the Katie Phang News Channel, which is like me, a collaborator with the Midas Touch Network, you have 59 videos in a playlist devoted to Jeffrey Epstein. And I'm sure I've got some number like that, and Ben Meiselas has a number like that. And what you're pointing out is this spoon feeding of information to journalists, which is in a way not only trying to make us part of the propaganda machine, because we're not getting the full story. We're getting only the unredacted portions that they want us to know, hoping we'll run with that part of the story. But here's what you write in your lawyers write in your complaint about some of these redactions, just to show the American people what should be happening here. I mean, look, as you and I as practicing lawyers know, what should be happening is there should be a special counsel who's independent and not conflicted of the Department of Justice investigating everything that's in whatever's in the Epstein files that have been disclosed, going after the predators and bringing them to justice. Mm-hmm. Short of that, you asked some very good questions. In paragraph 28, we'll put this up on Legal AF Substack as well for people to read. Like, what is the identity? Who is the person who wrote Epstein in 2014? Thank you for a fun night. Your littlest girl was a little naughty. Who wrote to Epstein in 2017? I met blank today. She's like Lolita from Nabokov, femme miniature. So now I should send you her type of candidates only. Who wrote him in 2018? I found at least 3 very good young poor, but we was so tired. Who are these people, and why aren't they being brought to justice? And then you go on to talk about the job that you've not been able to do as a member of the Fourth Estate to bring this to the American people and to bring these people to justice.
How am I supposed to bring these facts to the American people if I can't even read the damn pieces of paper, right? And it really, listen, I used to be a prosecutor, as you know, for many years. And so there is a sense of that old habits die hard. Like, it's not my job to prosecute any case, but it is my job to bring the truth to the American people, and I can't do it, simply put. And I also think it's important to note that, this is a law. Michael, this is not just, hey, it's discretionary. If I feel like putting out there, I will. This is a law that has been violated on the daily since December 19th of 2025. And I don't know about you, but I said this with Aaron Parnas, our friend, earlier. I said, I feel like we're in the state of stasis where nothing is happening and nothing is moving and nothing is happening. And part of that is because the Fourth Estate is being stifled. We are in a chokehold of information flow. And that is why I said, to hell with it. I'm suing because this is the type of action that the judicial system was created for me to pursue. And so I agree with you that I will not allow myself to be used as a propaganda arm for the Trump regime to only parrot what they want the American people to get. Yes, we report on it. So of course, as soon as there's files that are dropped, I'll talk about it. But there's more than that, obviously. And I'm also upset because we do know that the DJ continues to sit on millions of pages of documents as well. And so it's a multifold ask. But I'm also asking for a special master, Michael. I'm asking for a special master to be appointed who will be the referee on this and will call out the DOJ when they are in non-compliance with the law. And so that I don't have to do that and the Epstein survivors don't have to do that there's a special master who says, yeah, you have to turn that over to the American people.
Well, that's very smart. And you and I have been in cases where there's been a special master appointed. The Trump administration has had their fun for the last year in manipulating the documents and not producing them. Some victims tried to get judges in New York who had sort of temporary jurisdiction over aspects of the conviction or prosecutions of Maxwell and Epstein to take some sort of role in the production. They refused, citing limited jurisdiction. We just had an announcement. I called it a scam, a phony announcement about, the Office of Inspector General for the DOJ is opening an audit. And a lot of mainstream media ran. I wanted to like strangle their little necks. They ran with it. AIG opens investigation. It's not an investigation. It's an audit.
It's an audit.
There's an investigation bureau that's not being used that could get witness testimony and the like. This is an audit, okay? This is not going to reveal anything of substance. Your lawsuit, which I like a lot for many reasons, is very similar to situations where people may wonder, why does the media file to intervene in cases and to get a seat at the table and to get documents that have been sealed on the record unsealed? And why do they do that? And why do they file Freedom of Information Act requests in order to get it? The problem is there's no real suit that we can intervene in as media, and and the Freedom of Information Act requests have all been sort of ignored by this administration, right?
Yeah, and this is why it is a first of its kind. And I'm grateful that you recognize that, because it is the first time a journalist has sued pursuant to the Epstein Files Transparency Act. And it is also the first time a lawsuit has been brought pursuant to the Epstein Files Transparency Act. Congressman Ro Khanna and Tom Massey valiantly tried to get a special master appointed and could not do so. And, when you look at the law, it's kind of ironic. I want transparency pursuant to a law that says there's transparency, and there's no transparency. So I am fighting this fight because I believe that this is one of the ways that we use the system against them, Mike. This is one of the ways that we actually use the system in the manner within which it was created. And it is kind of a cool meld of my career as a trial lawyer and my career as an independent journalist all in one now. And it is a way for us to get the information out there. And then look, if there is criminal or civil implications to it, so be it. That is not my role, but my role is to get that information out there. And I am hampered every minute of every day post December 19th of 2025 or December 18th of 2025. I cannot do my job. And so I am asking the court, I'm not looking for money. This is not a money suit. Okay. I am looking for injunctive relief. I want the court to enter a declaratory judgment that forces the DOJ to turn over the entirety of the files, and with real respect for redactions and real explanations for withholdings versus the bullshit we've gotten from the DOJ so far.
Yeah, you mean just redacting all the white guys and Donald Trump, but leaving the victims in there?
Horrifically, yes. Violating their own laws. Yeah. I mean, look, I understand there is no enforcement mechanism for this non-compliance, but there is litigation, and litigation can compel compliance, and that's what we're seeking.
I agree with you. I mean, that was an argument you saw when the Department of Justice was worried that either just Judge Engelmeyer or Judge Berman in New York were going to try to take jurisdiction and order a special master, which, as you pointed out, Ro Khanna and Massey were asking for. They argued there's no remedy for the violation of the Epstein they actually wrote that, which I'm sure your lawyers are prepared for. There is no remedy for it. We can just violate it at will. I mean, I guess they think the House could sue over it, but no one else. I mean, this is an administration that has always been, from day one, catch me if you can. There's no remedies. Everything's either a violation of the separation of powers if it's done against them, but not the other way around. And right, we have a presidency. We're seeing it now play out. We can talk a little bit about it here. We're in the aftermath of the White House Correspondents' Dinner, where they're using it for propaganda purposes in order to try to crush dissent in America and point the finger at the Democrats for raising the level of political rhetoric to the point where Donald Trump's been on the receiving end of a couple of attempted assassination attempts, as opposed to pointing the finger at him for raising the level. I mean, look, is there any doubt that Trump needs to have Americans seething and at each other's throats in order to be successful? He doesn't want unity. He wants people to be scared of their neighbor, whether they're black, brown, hyphened, transgendered, or whatever.
Well, in this instance, it's a win-win for him. He foments hatred, and then he also gets a ballroom, right? Where he gets political donations that can remain anonymous, and he can sit there and continue the grift. I mean, it all kind of fits for his ultimate purpose. But to your point about, the DOJ, nani boo-boo, like no remedy, I'm only asking the DOJ to do their job. I'm not seeking financial damages. I'm not saying, give me money for the inability for me to be able to report. I'm just saying, do your damn job, DOJ, as the law requires you to do. And the irony doesn't escape to me or you or anybody, right? It's the group of lawyers that are shitting over the law. They're not doing their job. I'm just saying, do your job, comply with the law. And that's all you got to do. And when you do, bye. Thank you. I appreciate your help. And that's it.
Katie Fang out.
Peace out. But
Peace
until
out.
then, I am, as y'all know, I rattle cages, and I am doing it in a way that actually helps me do my job. It is not to be performative. Everything about this regime is performative.
Yeah.
This law was never intended to be performative, because there are people that were trafficked as children, that were raped as children. This law was never supposed to be performative. This law was supposed to bring some measure of closure. Again, whatever that accountability is defined, it was supposed to bring that closure for people. And it is such an insult, and a disgusting, abhorrent insult to the victims and survivors of Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, and others. I say that almost like a mantra because I am disgusted that a multi-decade trafficking ring of international proportions has only seen 2 people look at prosecution, one of whom is now mysteriously dead.
Right.
And I don't understand. And for me to report on it accurately, I just need to be able to see the documents.
Right. And just to back up for a minute, so we don't lose sight or lose the thread. Donald Trump never needed Congress to give the executive branch the permission to release all of the files in all of the agencies, from the IRS to the FBI to the SEC. That was a performative, distractive move to say, well, I'd love to disclose it, but Congress has to order me to. Suddenly now he's in favor of a violation of the separation of powers, Congress ordering the executive branch what to do. He never needed Congress's approval. He thought if he put up that as a buffer that he would get either time or delay and so what happened is he never anticipated that MAGA and the MAGA women would turn against him, like Marjorie Taylor Greene and the one that's running for the governorship, Nancy Mace. And he miscalculated about how many votes were really going to support these victims at the end, right? It turned out to be everyone but one in the House. So he never thought that these documents would see the light of day, and he'd have to answer for it, and can't. And it's been apparently internally, it's been burning him. It's been chapping his backside that this story, this scandal of what you just described won't just go away and die. Let me read 2 paragraphs from your complaint, paragraph 38 and 39, to remind people what's at stake. For example, 38, the department's first production of documents included an image of what appears to be Jeffrey Epstein's desk with 2 photographs of Donald Trump on it, one with Epstein and Maxwell, and another with several women in revealing swimsuits. The department removed the image from its website, only restored it after public outcry. But then 39, it included notes of interviews with victims and witnesses, one of whom alleged that Trump had forced her to perform oral sex when she was in her early teens. She further alleged that Epstein introduced her to Trump, and this file was taken down. Where is the accountability? Right? We got around the world. Lisa Phillips, my client, is on a world tour that stopped off in Parliament in London last week to get the Brits to go after the pedophiles in their midst and to bring them to justice and to put pressure on the United States by extension as King Charles arrives this week for his royal feting, at the White House. They got a lot of answering to do here, right?
Yeah, and it just, all of this that you've just explained just goes to show that Donald Trump controls the Department of Justice. There is no independence in the Department of Justice because Pamela Jo Bondi, prior to her termination, she could have disclosed the entirety of the Epstein files prior to it being passed into law under the Transparency Act. She could have done it. And she made a big scene about doing it. And in the end, she was left holding the bag because she ended up being full of shit about turning it all over, right? And then now we have a guy who's auditioning every day for the job, which is Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche, who was also personal counsel for Donald Trump, as Pammy Jo was, and as Emil Bove was, and Alina Habba, and Lizzie Halligan, and the list goes on and on. And, you have a guy who's actively auditioning for the job, who also could stand in his own independence if he chose, and to comply with the law. But no. And so because of this non-compliance, I am forced to bring suit.
Do you have a judge yet?
I don't think I should probably check with my lawyer.
You should do the reporting.
I should check with my lawyer. I don't know if we do. As you know, it'll be randomly assigned in the DC court. I will say this. My lawyer did explain to me that, don't you love this? My lawyers getting lawyers, but not like in the Rudy Giuliani way. Like not in the Sidney Powell, Rudy Giuliani day. Making attorneys get attorneys, MAGA?
Making attorneys get attorneys, right?
No, not in this way. The Todd Blanche can be served via email. Who knew?
Oh, right, because he's in the government. Right.
You can serve via email. And so service is pretty much done. And so we will have the TikTok on them responding. And of course, as you know, they'll probably move to dismiss, claiming I don't have standing to bring this lawsuit. But, it's been a fully vetted legal argument, and it's something that we've explored. And we've brought this lawsuit in good faith because we truly believe that I have standing to seek this remedy of having them comply with the law.
Yeah.
The irony doesn't escape me, Michael. I just want lawyers to abide by the law. That's it.
And I like the angle here, the threading the needle. It's not a federal tort claim. It's not a tort, right? Which would put you off into the world of demand letters.
Claim. It's an Administrative Procedures Act claim.
Administrative Procedures Act, which is implicit within a statute that Congress passed. And now it's up to somebody like you to come in and enforce it. And I think we've been waiting. I was like, who is going to deliver us from this madness and file this suit? Katie Phang.
Well, I appreciate that. No. And it did take some thought, and it was but it's so important, right? I mean, it goes beyond just you and me, and anybody who's tuning in right now. It goes towards accountability. And it's something that I think that, we cannot pay lip service to. It's something that we should live by daily. And I do believe that accountability comes when we try our damnedest to, speak truth to power. And in one way is I now have a speaking complaint that has been filed in federal court.
So glad to know you as a person, to be a friend of yours for so long. Who would have thought those years ago that we would be?
Well, there's a reason why we have been simpatico and friends for so long. And I think it also, and by the way, shout out to my brothers. I call them my little brothers, Ben, Jordy, and Brett, my Salas at Midas, and you as well. It does take us in independent media to do this. You think I could do this at MSNBC? Of course not, right? You think MSNBC would have chastened this down? No. This is what we do in independent media, which is why the support of our subscribers, our viewers is so important. They give us the strength and the courage to be able to chase this stuff down.
Don't hesitate right now, before this is even over. Go over to the Katie Phang channel. What do you call your channel? Katie Phang News?
Katie Phang News. Mm-hmm.
Go over to Katie Phang News, hit the subscribe button there, come over to her Substack as well, do the exact same thing. That's the way you can show support for what Katie does. Let's get her to 600,000 subscribers, hopefully by the end of this week. And I'm so glad you're here. Let's do more work together. I know you've been busy all over Minnesota. And we got Law Day. Let's try to do something around Law Day on May 1.
Oh, and that's May Day too. That is also General Strike Day, folks. So yeah, that's coming up too.
Yeah, let's do that too. Katie Phang joining Legal AF to talk about her groundbreaking, I said breathtaking and groundbreaking new lawsuit. First plaintiff ever bringing a case to enforce the Epstein Transparency Act. Katie Phang, journalist, lawyer, legal commentator extraordinaire. Thanks for being here. While you're here on Legal AF YouTube channel, take a moment, hit the free subscribe button as we continue our growth as an independent channel. Can't get your fill of Legal AF? Me neither. That's why we formed the Legal AF Substack. Every time we mention something in a hot take, whether it's a court filing or a oral argument, come over to the Substack. You'll find the court filing and the oral argument there, including a daily roundup that I do called, wait for it, Morning AF. What else? All the other contributors from Legal AF are there as well. We got some new reporting. We got interviews. We got ad-free versions of the podcast and hot takes. Where? Legal AF on Substack. Come over now to free subscribe.
There is tons of stuff coming at us all together. Really hard to make sense of it, and easy for your mind to pick one or two things that you think are all encompassing. But I suggest that one of the ways you should think about everything that's coming at us is that we have a lot of changes going on all at once. And they are changes that dramatically impact the future of the United States. So the changes that I want to call your attention to are the fact that Trump is falling apart and his presidency is falling apart. There is the United States and its position in the world is in real jeopardy right now because of Trump's war in Iran. I'll tell you a little bit about that's going on as well. So there's a lot of foreign affairs stuff jockeying, going back and forth. And at the same time in the United States, there are politicians, primarily Democrats, though a few Republicans, who are responding to the will of the people. And as they do so, they're both pushing back against the Trump administration and articulating new programs, new things they want out of the United States. And so as you look around, you've got all these different stories going on at the same time. And some of them are just eye-poppingly bad, and some of them are really sort of intriguing, and some of them are actually really eye-poppingly good. And it's hard to put all those things together because they're all sort of jumbling in one big basket. So I won't get to all of them. Obviously, I could just sit on, apparently there's a streamer who just spends all their time reacting to the news online. And I could totally do that. I could just sit here with my phone all day and comment on all the stories that are coming through these days, and we'd all be bored out of our minds. So we're not going to do that. But I will outline what I just suggested to you about the decline of the Trump presidency and what that looks like, and some of what's going on in Iran and how those two things are related, and perhaps some of the revisioning of the United States that is just beginning right now, but it's being picked up by a number of politicians, again, primarily Democrats, but some Republicans. So first of all, there was a story in the Wall Street Journal this weekend about the fact that Trump was so unhinged and so angry after the shooting down of the plane in Iran that his aides didn't actually keep him in the room when they were getting news from the front. Instead, they felt that his fury and his inability to manage the situation would do more harm than good. So they isolated him from what was actually going on and just told him the stuff that they thought he needed to know. That's a really big deal. That is a really big deal. If the commander-in-chief is incapable of being the commander-in-chief, that's 25th Amendment material, impeachment material. That's a really, really bad situation. Now, a number of you asked about the report that we have had over the weekend that Trump demanded the nuclear codes and that General Dan Kane wouldn't let him have them. I have not seen that myself from a credible source. I've seen it about 4 or 5 times, and it's my guess that somehow somebody took that story about how angry and inappropriate he was and took it a little bit beyond what information we now have would warrant. I could be wrong. There could be good, solid evidence of that out there that I just haven't seen. But it's not really a surprise because we know he talked that way in his first term. And we also know something that I feel has gotten really too little attention. And that's that in his first term, Trump's people initiated the development of sort of weaker nuclear weapons, strategic nuclear weapons than we'd had in the past, because they rejected the idea of massive deterrence and instead said, well, if we can create nuclear weapons that aren't as bad as the ones that would, simply flatten everything, we could actually use them, and that would be more of a deterrent than having nuclear weapons that nobody can use. And they did, in fact, develop those strategic nuclear weapons. And it's something that really hasn't gotten a lot of attention. But if you're interested, just Google it. Strategic nuclear weapons, Trump, and you'll see that information come up and what they were doing there. So it's not like you can see how somebody would have gotten there. Maybe Trump did do that. I personally have not seen anything that looked to me to be adequately sourced to say that really happened, but it wouldn't be a surprise. So there was that story coming out over the weekend, but there was more than that. Remember that the Wall Street Journal is owned by the Murdochs, who are the Fox News people, the real right-wing media people, and they have been looking the other way, at least, when the Wall Street Journal's reporters put out stories like this for a long time now, which suggests that they have really soured on Trump, and that will really matter for the larger media ecosystem. And just to be clear, the Wall Street Journal's editorial page is far right. It's really, I read it every day just to see what they're talking about, but it's really far right. Their journalists are very, very good. They're good, solid journalists. Especially Josh Dawsey is one of the ones that I follow. He moved over there from the Washington Post, but he's a really good, solid political reporter. And in fact, there's not a reporter over there off the top of my head that I have a complaint with. So when you hear Wall Street Journal, remember, there's a real difference between the editorial page and the news desk, and that this reporting from, I think Dawsey was on the story I just told you about, but it was good, solid reporting. Now, at the same time, over the weekend, and I don't remember what day it came out, there was a story in The Atlantic about Kash Patel, who's the director of the FBI. And what it said was that he has a drinking problem, he's not spending much time at the office, and that he himself is a national security risk. Now, he went on the talk shows on Sunday to say this isn't true, because he's actually had issues with Trump before over what he did, a number of things he's done, but he has not been a rock solid FBI director. But Trump was especially upset about the pictures of him drinking in the hockey locker room of the U.S. men's hockey team at the Olympics. And so he sort of went on the television to say this is, the story is not true at all, and then really to try and court Trump again by saying we're about to arrest people who were involved in stealing the 2020 election. And Patel has sort of a history of getting in trouble with Trump and then throwing him some red meat. And that seemed to be what he was doing. Then on Monday, he came out and sued The Atlantic and the author of that piece for $250 million, for $250 million. And that would, in fact, involve having what's called discovery in the trial, which would mean that people would have to testify under oath. And immediately, journalists have filed Freedom of Information Act requests of the government wanting to see Kash Patel's schedules and whether or not there are any memos or law enforcement or security enforcement issues, having the words hangover or drunk or anything like that. But there's something, not only is Kash Patel weakened and really a liability, not just for the country, but for the president. But there's something else about the stories that you're starting to see coming out of the administration. And I've said this to you before, a tight administration, an administration that is working well, is not going to have leaks. People are going to be loyal to the team, and they're not going to want to jeopardize their relationships, and they're happy with where they are, so they don't tend to leak. The Trump administration is leaking like a sieve. I mean, this is one of the places where Pete Hegseth, as defense secretary, has tried desperately to stop the leaks there. Remember, he tried to get rid of all the journalists who were at the Pentagon and replace them essentially with right-wing hacks, and it didn't work. In fact, the good journalists continue to have sources from within the Pentagon, and they're still getting great stories. But the fact that the members of the FBI have turned on Kash Patel to this degree, that I believe there were 12 people at least cited in that Atlantic story, suggests that the cabinet offices are starting to fall apart. And you saw the same thing at the Department of Labor, where the Secretary of Labor has just resigned because so many people complained about her tenure there and the advantage she was taking of people, asking them to bring liquor for one thing to her offices, asking her to do personal tasks, and having, I think, men in her family, I don't remember which ones they were apparently making advances on the women staffers in the department. Anyway, she resigned. And what you're seeing, I think, is a number of things. One of the things that interests me here is it strikes me that MAGA Republicans for so long have complained about everybody in government simply using the place for their own interests, that they really believed it was true. Then this is sort of a form of projection. You think other people would act like you would. That's not actually what was going on. People in those positions were actually doing their jobs. And then once MAGA people got in there and treated them with the disdain that they had held for those jobs, you're watching it all fall apart. And so that suggests now Trump has lost his Secretary of Labor, his Attorney General, and his Homeland Security Secretary, all women, which is not a coincidence. But remember I said to you a few months ago that you had to start picking away at his cabinet because his cabinet was protecting him, and not just by acting in certain ways that protected him, but by deflecting the other attacks that would come on him. He could just push them off on his cabinet secretaries, and those cabinet secretaries are dropping. And you saw today on the Hill, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the Secretary of Health and Human Services, just kind of getting eaten alive by people who were listening to him at a hearing. So more and more there is pushback against the administration, and that is a reflection in part of Trump's weakness, but it is also a way to weaken him. Those two things work together. All right. So what else do I mean by what's going on here? Iran. So if you remember, Trump went into Iran on February 28th, striking alongside of Israel. Benjamin Netanyahu, the prime minister of Israel, had given a presentation to Trump convincing him that it would be sort of quick and easy to go into Iran, and suggesting to him he could be a great hero if he did so. A presentation that he has made to every president, I think, since George W. Bush, and they've all said to him, this is, as somebody from the New York Times reported after Netanyahu's presentation to Trump, that it was delusional, that was simply not the way things were going to go. But Trump bought it in part because he had that quick strike against Venezuela and expected he could do the same thing in Iran. And instead what he did is he kicked a hornet's nest, and then he stomped on a hornet's nest, and then he rolled on the hornet's nest. And then all the other hornets came and he fought with them as well, because there's a real asymmetry between what the United States can do with all its extraordinary military might and what Iran needs to do in order to be able to declare victory over the United States. Those two things are asymmetrical. So the U.S. has done an enormous amount of damage to Iran, and Israel as well has done an enormous amount of damage to Iran. And Israel, of course, has been bombing southern Lebanon as well, where the Iranian-backed Hezbollah operates. They're a non-state actor, but they're backed by Iran, and they're not part of the Lebanon's government. So the recent ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon's government was that was the ceasefire that stopped the bombing in southern Lebanon for about a minute and a half. They're still, theoretically, the ceasefire is still holding. I don't quite understand how you can have ceasefires when everybody's still firing at each other, but there you go. I guess it's reduced. I don't know. But anyway, he expected that this is going to be quick and easy. And instead, what happened is that while the United States and Israel have done an enormous amount of damage, as I say, all Iran has to do to maintain victory, or to maintain that they are succeeding over the United States, is to survive. And in this case, to close the Strait of Hormuz, which is pretty easy to do. That's that strait through which about 20% of the world's oil travels, and more than that of liquid natural gas, and I think it's about 30% of the components of fertilizer. And you can really close it largely by threatening. And what that means is that the big world insurers, that are all of them backed by Lloyd's of London, which I talked about to you a few days ago, the insurers say, we can't insure you. And if you can't be insured, you can't run a ship. At the end of the day, who gets insured is and how insurance works is remarkably interesting. And someday I will do a whole lecture on insurance, because that really, once you get insurance, which comes from Lloyd's actually, Lloyd's actually started in a coffee house. I'm sorry, I won't go deeply in this rabbit hole, but it's sort of interesting. They started to insure ships by all the ship owners getting together and saying, we'll pool our resources to make sure that, it's called underwriting. They literally would put their names under each other's so that if one ship goes down, you don't lose everything. We all take a hit, but everybody can continue to function. And that's basically how we got the modern concept of insurance. And I'm going to stop there because it's really interesting how that translates to America. And it's killing me, but I'll stop there. Anyway, he expected this was going to be easy, and it hasn't been. And he keeps screaming at people going, we're winning, we're winning, we're winning. I won. This is great. Everything's lovely. And then Iran says the strait is closed because you're not doing what you said you were going to do. And he keeps screaming, you can't do that. You have to open the strait. And remember, first of all, he tried to get other countries to open the strait. And they were like, dude, it's not our problem. We didn't get a hornet's nest. And then he tried to threaten Iran into opening the strait. Remember, he said, civilization's going to die. And then over the last weekend, he simply said, great news, it's open. Everything's great. They're never going to close it again. And meanwhile, Iran's like, not really happening until you stop blockading our ports, which is what Trump has been doing. So what this has done is it has, first of all, dramatically weakened the United States, and it has dramatically strengthened Iran, but it's also made the United States look incredibly erratic because Trump will say one thing and his advisors will say something else, and then he'll turn around and change what he said. So, for example, he said that Vice President J.D. Vance was not going to Pakistan for talks, and then he said he was, and then he said he was on his way at the same time that J.D. Vance actually was in a motorcade pulling up to the White House. And then as of today, the talks were off, and he said he was not going to extend the ceasefire with Iran, which ends tomorrow. And then tonight, he said, I'm going to extend it indefinitely. And the bottom line is Trump has no good options in Iran. There really are no good options, simply because it's so easy for Iran to close the Strait of Hormuz, and it is not easy at all for Trump to force it to open again. And so probably what we're going to see there is Trump taking a huge loss and simply announcing that he won. And it will probably look like Iran reopening the strait in some form, and probably being able to either put a toll over the strait or have access to its frozen assets that are still around the world. But it's a really big problem for Trump. And one of the things that's going to come out of this, of course, is we're starting to see now is that gas, the price of a barrel of oil is sold as oil futures. And now we have seen the last of the oil from before Trump invaded coming to other countries. And so what you're going to see now is the more expensive oil starting to move its way into the system. And as that expensive oil moves its way into the system, you're going to see prices rising even more than they already are. So we've already seen inflation. You're going to see more and more inflation. And about 80% of the oil infrastructure in Iran has been damaged by the bombing, and it's also been damaged in other Middle East countries. So going into the summer, you're looking at really high prices, and it just is. That's the way it's going to be, and that's not going to help Trump's approval ratings, which are at all-time lows. There was a new poll out today that had him at 35% job approval, which is about the level, actually a little bit lower the level that George W. Bush was at the very end after Katrina and all that. And Trump's there now, and there's no sign of how that could possibly come back. All right. So there's a couple more things about what's going on here. With this weakening of Trump, you're seeing two real things. You're seeing, first of all, him doubling down on the idea of manipulating the vote in 2020. I'm sorry, what year we're in? 2026, the midterm vote. He's trying desperately to get voter rolls from around the states. And the reason for that is because he wants to get the voter rolls and run them through a piece of software that really crazily, confusingly has the same name as the SAVE Act. It's called the SAVE system. totally different acronym. But what it was designed to do was to look through people who were applying for federal benefits, housing benefits, food benefits, whatever, and to see whether or not they were an undocumented immigrant. Now, he wants to use voter rolls to put through that system because he insists he's going to find undocumented immigrants voting. That's a myth. They just don't vote. There's no reason to. And the system, as it's been put into play in a couple of Republican states, has a failure rate of 14%. Up to 14%, meaning that people get flagged as being an illegal voter, as an undocumented voter, when in fact they are completely legal. And what this is going to do is going to tangle up all those voting systems. So he's doubling down on that very unsuccessfully. This is being fought in virtually every state, even Republican states. But he's doubling down on that. He's also doubling down on trying to rev up his base. And you see that this week in this idea that he's reading the Bible as part of this America Reads the Bible thing from a Christian nationalist group that has been associated with election deniers from 2020. And with that, it's a little bit insidious here. The verse that he is reading is the same verse that was read the morning of January 1st, 2021, and has been associated with him because it's the verse about God saying, I will send someone to heal your nation. And true believers for Trump believe that that was him. And so he is reading this verse that harks back both to the insurrection of January 6, 2021, and that says, remember, I'm your savior. At the same time that he has also been posting pictures of himself as Jesus and picking a fight with the Pope. So he's trying to double down on that group of people. It does not seem at this point to be working. What is more worrisome about the 2026 elections is that he has amassed a war chest of $350 million to influence these elections. And there seems to be more of that coming from especially the tech bros who are very concerned about Democrats starting to rein in some of their contracts, starting to rein in their government contracts, starting to rein in some of the ways in which they're trying to spread these data centers. They seem determined to keep Trump and the pro crypto, pro tech bro group in office. And that's out there right now, as is the fact that with all the problems from the economy from Trump's war in Iran, there's real trouble in the Gulf because they can't sell oil right now. And the United Arab Emirates, or UAE, there's recently a story that they had asked Trump essentially to backstop their currency using our tax money. And in the, I'm afraid I don't remember what paper it's in today, there's a discussion of him actually saying, yeah, we're considering backstopping that currency, again, with our money from the Treasury. But you have to remember that the United Arab Emirates royal family, with their sovereign wealth funds, have invested in Trump and the Witkoff family's World Liberty Financial, which is their cryptocurrency. And they put $2 billion into the stable coin of that cryptocurrency. So they have essentially lent the Trump family the use of $2 billion, and they get to keep the interest off that. And because of those ties now, or at least those ties are there, the United States Treasury is saying, yeah, we'll help you out because of the war Trump started. And I think, again, this is one of the reasons we're all so confused about so much stuff coming at us, is it's really a rat's nest of ties and corruption in this administration, and it's going to be a lifetime to untangle it. Key to that was the idea that was promulgated, it was put forward first by Robert Bork, remember him, in the Department of Justice under Reagan, who took a look at antitrust laws, which have been around since 1890. That's when we first get the first antitrust law. And I'm going to do you a favor and not go into that story. Killing me though it is. But we've had them around since the 1890s. And the trick to our antitrust laws in the United States of America until the 1980s was they said that before two big companies can merge, the government needs to take a look at that and make sure it's good for the country. That makes sense, right? So we need to see if it's okay for labor, for workers. Is it going to hurt workers? Is it going to hurt consumers? Is it going to hurt the environment? Is it going to hurt, the community?